What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I've got a video for you all that I have been actually wanting to make for a long time now. So with Blizzcon, virtual Blizzcon, unfortunately this year being in about 2 or so weeks, give or take, I've been getting a question a lot on stream here, just in general for speculation. Do you think we're going to be able to wear 2 legendaries, double legendaries in 9.1? Now, the first question obviously is 9.1 the next patch? Because recently on PTR, we saw a build hit called WoW Vendor for 9.0.5, which sort of does imply that there very well could be, I guess, a mini patch between then and 9.1. Now, if you're asking me, honestly, I'm not really sure if that holds much merit. It very well could, but I think at this point, for the most part, we haven't heard anything about 9.1. We haven't heard anything about the next raid. We haven't heard anything. BlizzCon's in 2 weeks, and at this point, I would assume that Blizzard's most likely is holding on to everything that they were planning on spoiling at BlizzCon in November for the end of February, which has sort of left the player base in a bit of an awkward spot. We don't really know what's going on in Shadowlands outside of actual Castle Nathria, which for the most part has been defeated, and my guild should end up killing Mythic Nathrius at some point tomorrow night or early next week. Fingers crossed for tomorrow night because Hall of Fame closes. But today I want to talk to you guys about double legendary combinations for Warlocks. I also found out recently that you can actually sim 2 legendary combinations in SimCraft, even though there probably is a bit of tweaking and tuning to do to APLs. I want to take a look at that and then go from there. So let's get right into it. So the first thing that I had to do when I actually realized, okay, we should probably look a bit back at Legion and see when we were able to wear double legendaries, was try and dig through logs to find out when exactly the 2 legendary combination became a thing. Now, I thought it was actually somewhere around like Nighthold era after Trial of Valor, maybe even going into Tomb of Sargeras. But then I remembered, and was actually reminded a lot in Twitch chat, that Tomb of Sargeras is about when we started getting legendary tokens on mains, because you had acquired all of them, or you could get, you know, let's say a rogue one to drop on your Warlock or a druid on your paladin, because you could get them for your alts and mail them around. When I actually went back through Warcraft logs and looked around, we actually had double legendary combinations in Emerald Nightmare. Now, this was not for early Emerald Nightmare as far as I remember, at least. Hey, a shout out to my boy Jet right there. This was not an early Emerald Nightmare as far as I remember, but it still was a thing. Now, Emerald Nightmare, for those of you who aren't familiar with Legion raiding, Emerald Nightmare was the first raid. It was, I believe, how many bosses did we have? 7, right? It was 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. I still got it. 7 bosses. We had 7 bosses, you know, which looking at, you know, today in Shadowlands, Castle Nathria actually has 10, which just made it a much longer raid than I would assume many had hoped for. Regardless, though, that was the first raid tier of the actual expansion. Now, Blizzard has not mentioned really anything about double legendary combinations. I would assume that they're probably going to mention or maybe hint at something at BlizzCon. If not, full out just say, hey, in 9.1 or whatever next patch we're going to have, you're actually able to wear them. But if things follow suit with how they went in Legion, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if next patch we do end up getting double legendary combinations. Now, for certain specs and certain classes, some things and certain interactions with some are probably going to be a lot more powerful than others. But my main question before we get into that and get into some sims here that I've run, just for, I guess I'm going to run. I haven't run them yet. I want to guess which combinations are going to be the best. I sort of want to like speculate and talk a bit about how I'm wondering they're going to make it a thing if they actually do, because you can see here I couldn't find a Warlock one anywhere. I believe this is a mage one, but regardless, in Legion you had to essentially progress your order hall. Every class had their own order hall. Warlocks had, I think, the Black Harvest somewhere in Dalaran. Every single class had to progress through their order hall, and their final choice, you had column A, column B, but both the columns converge at the end, and the final choice for a whopping 15,000 resources, I believe is what it was, allowed you to wear 2 legendaries at once. Now, we do sort of have Covenant Halls of sorts in Shadowlands. We don't have, well, I guess Covenant Halls, sure. We don't have class halls, we have Covenant Halls. Night Fae, Nightfire Lord, Venthyr, and Kyrian. Now, you do have the 4 transport networks and various things depending which covenant you actually have, but I could very well see them tying some kind of double legendary combination potential into the ways you spend your anima, the ways you spend your souls. Now, we know, like, you know, the transportation network or the mushroom network or the, I believe, Queen's Garden for Night Fae It takes a lot of anima to actually complete layers 2, or I guess level 2, and build level 3 of those. I believe it's a whopping like 15,000. Now Blizzard has recently buffed anima drops. I believe each raid boss is dropping 100 or so in Nathria, so it's about, I think it's 125, so it equates to about 1200 for a full clear. And at the end of dungeons they're dropping 100 or so, which is a big step up from 35. I mean, being real here, I believe I actually have roughly, I think I have rank 1 of every single like node that I can make in my order hall, and then I have the rank 2 transportation network because, I mean, hey, you know, it's worth it. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Blizzard tie something into that to make it a bit of a grind, but not something that's too hard to do. It's something that you can keep the player base engaged in between 9.0 into 9.0.5 or 9.1 if double legendaries do indeed become a thing there. Because let's be real here, at this current point in time, the player base has sort of been left in the dark as to what's going on with the next patch. There's been speculation, there's been rumors of the next raid being in Maldraxxus, but what I'm sort of thinking is probably going to happen at Virtual BlizzCon in a few weeks is Blizzard's going to hit us with a lot of things. One of them being, hey, here's the new raid. Hey, next week we're going to have raid testing going on. That would be awesome if that's the case. PTR is coming up in 2 days, but at the same time, I sort of wish we had a bit more of an idea of what's going on. I know the Blizzard hype is all around BlizzCon this year, but I mean, I'm hoping that I have a few weeks off between actual Tired and Athreus dying and 9.0.5 or 9.1 PTR coming up. Regardless though, let's take a look at each Warlock specs legendary combinations, I guess potential legendary combinations, and then get into a few sims. Now, before we actually get into talking about potential combinations of legendaries and how strong they can be, yes, I'm going to say there are some frontrunners for each spec, like we know right now in Shadowlands. Synergy is very good across the board. Agony Shard Gen's good. There's some good Destro ones, some good Demo ones. But the interesting thing is that even looking back to Legion, there were certain effects that weren't incredibly strong on their own, but when they were stacked with another effect, they actually gained a lot of power. So starting off with destruction here, the first thing I want to mention is Cinders of Azakir. Now, this is one of the, I guess, 2-ish, depending what you're looking at, that does a lot of damage. It's just one of the better choices. It says Conflagrate has 1 additional charge and has its recharge time reduced by 3 seconds. Now this is the one legendary that makes Roaring Blaze much better because Conflagrate applies Roaring Blaze, and the reduced actual cast time or recharge time stacks with the amount of haste reduction you get on your Conflagrate to begin with. So number 1 off the bat, this is a bit more shard gen, a bit more hasted spells being cast, and it really makes single target and 2 target Destro just feel a lot better. Cinders has been a very good contender in single target Destro, 2 target Destro, and even in Mythic Plus, playing the Roaring Blaze build and things at times. Embers of the Diabolic Raiment gives Incinerate 100% additional chance to generate Earth Soul Shards. This gives you a lot of Soul Shard generation. Now, there is a bit of synergy here with Cinders and Diabolic Raiment because Conflagrate reduces the cast time of Incinerate or Chaos Bolt, and it gives through Backdraft, and Backdraft gives you get 2 stacks per Conflagrate. So having that at Embers equip means that you're probably going to have a decent bit of shards flowing in a lot faster than you actually will playing normal Destro, maybe with Synergy by itself or Synergy and, I don't know, Wilfred's, let's say, for example, right? There's a lot of shards flowing in through both of these. If you put that maybe in a Reign of Chaos setting or a setting where you're just dumping a lot of shards back to back to back, combining that with Soul Conduit potentially, that can make for just an insane amount of shards, sort of mirroring how Destro felt a little bit in Legion, depending on how you looked at it. You have Odir, enemies marked by your Havoc take 25% increased damage. It's sort of your set it and forget it, I guess, kind of Havoc legendary. It's fine. This does indeed work single target. You can put Havoc on 1 target if you're in, like, you know, a patchwork fight of sorts, and get that 25% increased damage. There is a build going around that I've heard a little bit about, playing this and playing other weird like Havoc damage stacking effects like Duplicitous Havoc, and giving you a lot of single target damage when you apply your Havoc in like arenas and battle rounds, even certain raid fights. But I feel like you're reaching a bit too far just by trying to make weird single target Destro work. Regardless, I don't see a tremendous amount of synergy with Odir with anything else really here. Sure, it gains value in 2 targets. Cinders does give you another Conflagrate stack, and I guess technically Cinders with Odir will give you a lot more shard generation, a lot more just opportunities to cast more spells in a Havoc window. So I guess there is a bit of synergy here. I could see this combination being pretty good in 2-target, depending what fights arise in 9.1 and the next raid. Madness of Azakir, this is a really interesting one. It's picked up a lot of ground recently. Chaos Bolt increases the damage of Chaos Bolt by 25% and reduces the cast time by 20% for 3 seconds. So once again, Cinders, Conflagrate, each Conflagrate, 2 charges of Backdraft, already reducing the cast time of Chaos Bolt, reducing the cast time even more and having more opportunities to do that even more, while also having another Conflagrate charge, more increased shard generation. You can launch some pretty fast Chaos Bolts with Cinders and Madness being combined here. Now, this has not really been a front runner by any means for PvE over the course of 9.0, but that, once again, that could change with certain things being combined here. The final one we have here, I guess we have 2. Wilfred's, every soul shard you spend reduces the cooldown of your Infernal by 1.5 seconds. Wilfred's has seen a decent bit of play in Mythic Plus with the Reign of Chaos build and a few other fights here and there. Now, we have talked a bit about shard generation with Embers and Cinders and things like that, but I don't really think it's going to make that big of a difference when you take Wilfred's into account. Yes, a shorter Infernal is very good, but when it comes to raiding, you're looking at, I mean, depending on the fight, you're probably more or less looking at playing Roaring Blaze. That gives you a 3-minute Infernal, and when you drop it, it's nowhere near, it's still strong, but it's not as strong as having a Reign of Chaos window in a sense in an AoE setting, which is where you see most of Wilfred's actually being played. The final choice we have here, Relic of Demonic Synergy. Now, this is one of the front runners for just being, hey, this is good raw power level wise. If your pet deals damage, it has a chance to give you a 10% bonus to your damage for 15 seconds. The same for you to your pet. Synergy has been one of, if not the best legendaries for Destro, for Demo, for Affliction, pretty much for all of 9.0. It's not as good for Demo as it is for Destro and Aff, but it's still there. So obviously you can say off the bat, right, having Demonic Synergy and let's say Cinders combined is probably going to be pretty insane when it comes to 2-target and single target. It's going to be a pretty substantial bump increase in Destro's power. You can also say playing Synergy and Wilfred's in Mythic Plus is also going to be really good, especially if you can chain Demonic Synergy procs during your Infernal. But you also have a bit of play with Synergy and Madness, because a 25% increase to Chaos Bolt's damage with Synergy procking, maybe playing Dark Soul or things like that, could add extra value to Dark Soul, could add more value to Soul Conduit, it could change a lot of things here as well. So there's a potential for there to be the play besides Demonic Synergy and Cinders. I could see a world where Madness gains a decent bit of value. I could see where Wilfred's with Synergy is played a lot in Mythic Plus. There's a chance for an interesting combination to actually arise here for Destro. These 5 here, for the most part, 6, 7, however many they are, they're cool, but let's be real here. Destro has some front runners, being Cinders, being Synergy, being Wilfred's at times, but there's a lot of synergy with Diabolic Raiment and Madness of Azakir with Cinders and other combinations, potentially, depending on what builds arise through buffs and nerfs, and also just how things shake out heading into the next patch. Sort of similar to how Destruction is, Affliction also has a couple of front runners, mainly being Demonic Synergy and Perpetual Agony of Azakir, that have really been the de facto choices for most of 9.0 legendary wise. Now, right off the bat, you can say, hey, yeah, combining Demonic Synergy and combining Perpetual Agony of Azakir is probably going to be really good. It probably is. They're both good. They're both very close when it comes to single target. They're very close in 2-target, 3-target. Even like when Agony pulls ahead a bit in multi-target, you're not always able to dump all the shards compared to where you can with Synergy. Looking at fights like Council of Blood, looking at fights like others where we have multiple targets, for example, maybe Sun King Salvation, which is where Synergy is also very solid. But having the option of having more shards while also having the chance of getting a 10% damage proc here is just really, really strong off the bat with not much else left to say. Interestingly enough, though, Affliction also has Sacrilash's Dark Strike. Now, Sacrilash's Dark Strike is the Legion Corruption Slow legendary effect. The slow was reduced from 60 to 50% in Shadowlands, but it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. It is what it is. It has a 15% corruption damage increase tacked onto it, and also, once again, the slow. Now, I was actually really curious if we would end up seeing a decent bit of this in 9.0 for Mythic Plus. Now, number one, Warlocks aren't meta right now. This is not Legion Aff, unfortunately. I do think this version of Affliction is a lot better than what we saw in BFA. Maybe with things changing down the line, we'll see a bit of Afflock play in Mythic Plus as far as like an MDI meta level, but let's be real here. Who knows? Regardless, though, having only access to one legendary in 9.0 has made things a bit I guess awkward, you can say. Obviously Mythic Plus tuning and things is a challenge in itself, so playing your powerhouse DPS legendary is for the most part what basically everyone is doing. Now once again, Agony and Synergy would be a great combination. Let's be real here, more shard gen, damage proxy, Mythic Plus, but having access to a second potential legendary does sort of open the door for playing, let's say, all right, Agony or Synergy with Sacrilash's Dark Strike, because Sacrilash is a bit of a damage increase. Corruption deals 15% more damage. You can play ACM plus, even without it, it still deals more damage, and the actual slow effect of Dark Strike is solid. We're basically in a tank kiting meta at this point from what I've seen a lot when it comes to Mythic Plus and the higher end. And thinking back to Legion, yes, tank threat has changed, yes, things have changed in general, but kiting was a very, very, very big part of the meta as well. And one of the big reasons why Warlocks were brought to keys was because Corruption legendary slow. A tank could pull a pack, get threat, just run, kite them, stand back there, do whatever they need to do, and the pack would never reach them. Absolute Corruption was applied, the pack was slowed, the range could kill it, the melee could, dance in and out, praying they wouldn't pull threat and get smacked. But it's an option, and having the potential to play one good DPS legendary and then one that's still solid, not as good as the second one, but brings a lot of utility, does sort of open windows, or I guess open doors in a sense, both, whatever the analogy is, for Warlocks to maybe become a little bit more meta in Mythic Plus. I'm really curious to see where this legendary goes the next patch. Similar to Sacrilash's Dark Strike, Wrath of Consumption is also a legendary effect from Legion, and it with a bit of a twist on it. Targets die with Agony or Corruption applied to them grant you Wrath of Consumption. It increases all your periodic damage dealt by 5% for 20 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now, Drain Soul is indeed periodic damage. This does increase the damage of Drain Soul. Not very relevant, but hey, I figured I'd throw it out there because someone's going to ask. So, Wrath of Consumption is an interesting legendary. It was very good in Legion because it wasn't just Agony or Corruption. It was whenever you deal damage to a target, you get Wrath of Consumption. Soul Flame was also a thing in Legion. So if you hit one target and it died with Soul Flame and splashed everything else, Wrath of Consumption was pretty strong. This is also a bit of a neutered version of it. Longer duration, more or less damage depending how you look at it, but also harder to actually get the effect because you have to have Agony or Corruption applied to your target. Regardless, Wrath gains a lot of value in Mythic Plus because there are a lot of mobs dying. Now, some keys have more mobs, looking at like Halls of Atonement versus, let's say, Spires of Ascension or the other side. But Wrath Consumption is also in a similar spot to Sacrilash's Dark Strike. It can be pretty good in a lot of settings. It's a bit more narrow, a bit more niche, but looking at playing like Demonic Synergy or Wrath in Mythic Plus or Agony in Wrath, that actually looks really enticing in a higher end Mythic Plus setting where you're pulling, it's a coordinated group, and you're pulling and you're chaining pack after pack after pack. The power of Wrath of Consumption is built into that. It's it's staying in combat. It's getting the 5 stack of Wrath and chaining into the next pack, killing the next mob before it drops, and maintaining that 5 stack from pack to pack to pack. And carrying it into a boss. It's really, really strong. It's essentially a 25% damage increase to a decent bit of your spells. Now, it does not increase Malefic Rapture's damage. I know dots don't do much damage. I get it, guys. But still, increasing dot damage by 25% is still a decent bit when you have 2, 3, 4 dots, depending how much you're rolling Mythic Plus. So we'll see where this goes. Both these have a decent bit of potential when it comes to 9.0.5 or 9.1. Malefic Wrath is a legendary that got a lot of hype in beta. Mainly being Neck for Lord, Drain Soul, Execute, stacking, and all that. This is a powerful effect, and it gains even more value because of the damage modifier from Synergy if you have Malefic Wrath up, and it procs, and you get the Drain Soul damage. Unfortunately, Malefic Wrath is a really weird effect in itself. It sort of alters your rotation, playing Affliction, and let's be real here, Perpetual Agony and Demonic Synergy are just really good on their own. They're good on pull, they're good 80%, 60%. Malefic Wrath is fine at higher health pools too, but let's be real here, it gains value when you're playing Drain Soul, which you would be. I'm just showing Shadow Bolt because I'm playing Destruction right now. And it makes your rotation awkward. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Malefic Wrath gain a decent bit of value in Sims, playing it with like Demonic Synergy, or maybe another effect here and there. But I don't really expect Malefic Wrath to gain a crazy amount of value or play. I would assume that it might sim well, but it's one of those things that you really just don't go near because there aren't really a whole lot of patchwork fights from tier to tier. We have 4 in Nathria, which is actually insane. And even with that being the case, I don't really think many people have made Malefic Wrath. So Wilfred's, once again, it's okay for it's really not very good. It's okay. It'll reduce the cooldown of your Dark Lair. Dark Lair doesn't really do a whole lot of damage, so unless they change the way Dark Lair works, I'm not crazy excited about Wilfred's. I'm guessing the highest combination here is going to be Synergy with Perpetual Agony, but I'm curious to see where Malefic Wrath and Synergy, or Malefic Wrath and actual Azakir are too. And I would also keep an eye on both these when it comes to Mythic Plus. So obviously I saved the best for last here, being Demonology, because Demonology is going to be the best spec next patch. I guarantee it. I can lie to myself all I want, but yeah. So anyways, Demonology actually has 6 to 7 legendaries that are all pretty decent at what they actually do. Now, Force of the Horn Nightmare and Wilfred's, they're both for the most part universally pretty good, because you're always casting Hand of Gul'dan. So Force of the Horn Nightmare always has a chance to proc, whether it's single target, AoE, Mythic Plus, Battlegrounds, whatever. You're always casting Hand of Gul'dan as a Demonology Warlock. Wilfred's, once again, also, they should say Tyrant. It just bugged. Welcome to Shadowlands. It just bugged when you're spending shards on Hand of Gul'dan on Dreadstalker, so you're always getting this reduction as long as you're maintaining the normal Demonology rotation. So Wilfred's is also pretty good universally, depending on what you're doing. Synergy's not bad. It's not as good as it is for Destruction or Affliction, but it's a solid middle ground when it comes to Demonology. But when you get into these three here, Implosive, Grim Inquisitors, and Bale Spiders is very niche. It's single target based. It's not bad. It's just that there are other options that I feel are a little better when it comes to single target. Looking at maybe the combination of like Wilfred's and Horn Nightmare, it's sort of narrow. Now, this was changed on beta to last 15 seconds, but had the actual Demon Bolt damage and produced, I believe, like 100 or 200% in 4 stacks to 32. Either way, it's not a terrible option. I just don't know if the actual power is there. Now, if you're playing pure single target, and let's say play Synergy and Bale Spiders being combined, obviously the Synergy will, like, proc will stack with this because it's your actual damage, your actual Demon Bolt, so your pet proc Synergy for you. There's a bit of synergy there, pun half intended, but I just don't think Bale Spiders is really going to have what it takes to bring it home. Grim Inquisitor Strike Calling increases the damage of our Dreadstalkers. It's fine. It works well with the FTS Dreadlash build and Mythic Plus for bigger Dreadbite damage from your dogs. But once again, I think the power level here is just a little bit lacking when you look at these three, which are good universally, and Implosive Potential, which we'll get to right now, which is really good in the right settings. So Implosive Potential grants you 1% haste for 8 seconds for each imp imploded. When you hit 3 or more targets, you get 5% haste for each imp imploded. Now, for the most part, you're imploding baseline 6 imps, anywhere from like to 9, 11, 12-ish, depending on Soul Conduit refunds, or a lot more if you have your Tyrant out and your imps are extended for a massive haste buff. Now, the issue with Implosive Potential is that it's really good in Mythic Plus, or I guess heavy AoE settings when you can implode on multiple targets most of the time. The problem is when you get to a boss or a single target encounter, it doesn't really do a whole lot. 1% haste per imp imploded is not really a tremendous amount. However, having the option of playing this with, let's say, Synergy or Wilfred's or Horn Nightmare, giving you, number one, the consistent damage in, 1 target, 2 target, 3 target, the raw power gain, and then combining the explosive damage of Implosive Potential actually might go a long way. Combining this with Horn Nightmare, I mean, number one, Horn Nightmare has a chance to summon more imps. Now, Horn Nightmare works if you put 3 handed shards into a Hand of Gul'dan and it procs, you'll get 6 imps, 3 from the one you cast and 3 from the proc. If you put 2, for whatever reason, which you shouldn't do, you'll get 2 from the hands you cast and 2 from the actual proc. So combining these two together actually gives a lot of potential for a lot of extra imps in an implosion, which gives, hey, anywhere from 5, 10, 15% more haste in AoE settings. So there's a lot of synergy between Implosive Potential and Force of the Horn Nightmare. Now, Wilfred's Sigil, there's synergy here as well, because a shorter Tyrant means you're going to be casting them more often. Tyrant was changed in Legion or in Shadowlands. It no longer kills your imps when you cast your Tyrant with consumption. It extends them. It just siphons health from them. So more Tyrants mean more imp extensions. More imp extensions mean more implosions with a few of the imps out. That means you get these much larger haste implosion windows, a little bit shorter than normal and a bit more frequently than normal because a shorter Tyrant. Now, synergy, hey, it's there. It's fine. It is what it is. Implosion, synergy will increase your implosion damage if it procs and you implode, but I don't think this is like incredibly synergistic with implosive potential. These two though, and especially Horn Nightmare, has a lot of potential with implosive potential. I'm really excited to test this, and I guess PTR whenever it comes out, and really getting in the next patch, if obviously double legendaries are indeed a thing, which I assume they probably will be. Either way, you can't ignore the raw power of just playing Wilfred's and Horn Nightmare, or even Synergy and any of these two. All three of these effects are good basically wherever you go. A flat damage increase, a flat tyrant reduction, and a flat chance to cast another Hand of Gul'dan for free. Whether it's the Hand of Gul'dan splash damage or the actual imps that it summons, all three of these are universally good. And you can't necessarily, I mean, you can sort of say that for Aff with Synergy and with Agony, and maybe Destro with like Cinders and Wilfred's or Synergy, but like Demonology, like these three are all just good wherever you go. So there's a lot of interesting combinations you can get with Synergy, with Wilfred's, with Horn Nightmare, with Implosive, depending on the actual setting. I'm really excited to actually start simming a little bit with Demonology double legendary combinations. Speaking of that, let's start getting into a few of those sims. Now, I will say these sims, I'll have a link to all of them in the comment section below. I would assume the APLs are not optimized for them. I mean, they're not going to be. There's probably going to be little things here and there that need to be changed to, you know, to account for this and that being combined. But regardless, it's cool to see the raw power level increase. It's cool to see where they're at. I did not run every single legendary combination possible for each spec. If I did, the sim would take 18 years to finish. I ran the ones that I felt would be the most effective, the most impactful. With that being said, let's get into it. All right, so finally getting to the double legendary sims here. Spoilers, I guess, because I'm already on the first one. So starting off with Affliction here, this is a 5-minute one boss target sim. Now for Affliction, we really only simmed 3 different legendaries: Synergy, Malefic Wrath, and Agony Shard Gen in single target, and even in AoE. Now we could have simmed Corruption, but we sort of know where the Corruption legendary lies damage wise in 2 target, 3 target. You can still sim that now. That's a lot of utility that it brings, and you can't unfortunately really sim Wrath Consumption because that requires mobs dying, and that would require making it a different sim besides Patchwork, which would throw everything off. As far as Wilfred's goes, Wilfred is still not very good for Affliction, so we didn't bother simming it in single target or multi-target, which you'll see in a minute here. But regardless, before we get into these, I want you guys to keep in mind that I'm sure APLs are probably not optimized for these, and we don't even know if it's going to be really a thing, I guess, in 9.1 or whatever next patch we get. But like I said, I personally just wanted to do this anyways. I thought it'd be really cool, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. So, starting off with Affliction. Patchwork 5-minute one boss target. Synergy and Malefic Wrath are simming a tiny bit higher than Synergy and Agony in pure single target. Now, if you go into the actual full HTML report here, you will indeed see that Synergy and Malefic Wrath are the 2 legendaries we're wearing. They're at 235 eye level. Now, I'm also going to say every single gear set in this is consistent. If it's not a legendary slot, it's an item at 226 eye level. So there's no weird, or my ring. My one ring is 207, but it's consistent across every single sim. So the eye level is the same. There's no weird, you know, 226 piece replacing a 207, vice versa. It's the same across the board. I will also have a link to all these sims in the video's comment section, description, if you want to check it out and grab them or look at them. So, like I said, you have Malefic Wrath with Synergy beating out Synergy Agony Shard Gen by a tiny bit here. But if you open up the actual profile, you'll see that like the max sim for Synergy Agony with a bit of RNG factored in here is much higher, about 7330 versus 7200. Now that might not seem like a whole lot, but it actually is when you're talking just, you know, a few thousand DPS that we're doing. Plus, it's going to be, I mean, it's going to gain even more value in 2 target, 3 target, which we'll see in a minute here when we get to that sim. But it's going to be consistent in a sense, even though there's a bit of RNG mixed in with Agony Shard Gen. You have the consistency of Synergy, and you have that 20% increased Shard Gen with Agony Shard Gen, legendary, obviously. Now, Malefic Wrath, I'll be real, actually has simmed really high in single target. Even currently now it does. Once again, the problem with Malefic Wrath is that, number one, even on Patchwork fights, it alters the rotation to a point where it's really awkward and not really something you want to be doing. And number two, trying to juggle Synergy with Malefic Wrath, really just trying to juggle Malefic Wrath on any fight that has any movement, maintaining the stacks, everything is an actual nightmare. So as far as I'm concerned, the best combination here is actually Synergy with Agony Shard Gen for pure single target. Moving on to a 3 target 5-minute sim though, you will indeed see that Synergy and Agony Shard Gen overtake Synergy and Malefic by a decent bit. Now I'll say I'm a little surprised to see Agony about, I mean, what, 200 DPS or so behind Synergy here, but I haven't really kept up with the scaling a crazy amount on Synergy versus Agony and 3 target, 4 target. I would assume if we ran a 4 or 5 target sim, that Agony shard gen would most likely overtake Synergy, but at a certain point it becomes hard to dump shards because you have so many Agonies rolling and so many shards coming in. So I mean, TLDR, the Synergy Agony shard gen combination for Affliction is looking really strong, like we thought it would be. I think it's probably the most cut and dry, clear double legendary combination we probably knew was going to be pretty solid for any spec heading into next patch, if it is indeed a thing. Moving on to destruction now, we're starting off with the single target 5-minute sims, and I guess these are a little expected in a sense. Synergy and Cinders are just good for destruction. Now this is running a Roaring Blaze channel Demon Fire profile. Once again, links to them in the video description. Synergy and Cinders are actually ahead by a pretty substantial amount, about 250 DPS. Once again, I'm also look at the actual sim DPS of Affliction and look at Destro here. I'm just saying, you know, there's not a huge difference here, and here's a pretty big difference in Destro. Once again, APL is probably unoptimized, but still, it's actually a thing. The Synergy Cinders combination seems really strong when paired together compared to like Cinders, Embers, and honestly I have to look back and see what Embers even is. Embers is shard gen, Cinders is actual another conflict rate, which we hinted at a little bit actually when we were talking about it, because Cinders giving you more shard gen essentially through the third conflict rate, which is hasting your other incinerate cast, which give more shards from Embers. You get a decent bit of shard gen here, so not incredibly surprising here. But remember when we talked about Cinders and Madness of Azakir being the Chaos Bolt legendary being potentially really good in a 2 target sim. Cinders, Synergy, still number 1 here. 5 minutes, two boss targets, but look what's second, Cinders and Madness, and it actually closed the gap a pretty good bit, which we'll see. It's different when you get the 3 targets here, but pure 2 targets, Cinders and Madness actually closed the gap a pretty good bit. Cinders being triple conflag, Madness being Chaos Bolt damage, hasted Chaos Bolts. This gives you really big havoc windows, and on a fight where you might need this, like let's say if you have a Huntsman Altamore-esque kind of fight next here, this could very well be the play. This is also not simming with Duplicitous Havoc, which should stack damage-wise a bit with the actual Madness legendary. So that's actually something to keep in mind, and there's a bit of disparity here too. Exactly 100 DPS between Synergy and Madness. Madness gaining a lot of value in 2 targets compared to 1 being valuable, sort of, but you can see it gains a lot in 2 targets here for Destro. 3 target wise, 3 target Destro, Synergy, Cinder still ahead by a decent bit, followed by Synergy, then Madness, Cinders, then Madness, TLDR. Also, by the way, I wanted to point out Wilfred's here. Wilfred's is very, very duration, kill time dependent and stuff. If we ran different sims at like the 330 mark, the 230 mark, whatever, what have you for Wilfred's, it would gain and lose a bit of value. That's just how Wilfred's always is. So, I mean, TLDR, Cinders is starting to scale pretty well here because we're getting the 3 target territory, Synergy and Cinders still being number 1. Followed by Synergy, Madness, and then Cinders, Madness gaining a decent bit of value here, which is actually pretty cool to see, because Madness to me is a pretty cool legendary. So I'm actually surprised by this, but honestly this combination right here, if it's a thing, Cinders, Madness is probably going to give you the most consistent havoc windows. If you get a Synergy proc in a havoc window, okay, you know, probably gonna crank. But if you don't, whether you're playing Synergy, Madness, or Synergy, Cinders, the most consistent is probably going to be Cinders with Madness, because you know you're going to have 3 conflict rate charges, you know you're going to have hasted Chaos Bolts, and you can dump 3 Chaos Bolts in a Havoc window right now without playing either of these legendaries if you set up properly for it, because Havoc's duration was increased by 2 seconds heading into Shadowlands in later beta, I think later alpha. Either way, Cinders and Madness very well could be a pretty big sleeper combination for certain fights next tier if Destro is indeed the front runner. So moving on, once again, the best for last, Demonology sims. These are actually really interesting. They're not what I thought they'd be. So single target patchwork Destro. There are a lot of combinations here. I did not sim every single one because some legendaries are pretty bad in single target or 2 target, whatever, what have you. Horned Nightmare with Demonic Synergy. So once again, Wilfred's here. You can see Horn Nightmare. I mean, we can scroll down here. You can see, where's Horn Nightmare with Wilfred's? Wilfred's Bale Spiders, Wilfred's Horn. Here we go. This is going to be very kill time dependent because your Tyrant is a much shorter cooldown with Wilfred's in general, and with Wilfred's compared to what your Infernal is. So if we change the kill time a bit here, which we actually do in these a tiny bit, you see Wilfred's gain and lose a bit of value depending what you're actually doing. But Horn Nightmare, synergy, just actually having that raw value. Horn Nightmare, every single thing you do as demo, you're casting Hand of Gul'dan. Synergy, if it procs, it's extra damage. They're both just solid and they're both consistent. The really interesting thing here, Horned Nightmare and Grim Inquisitor Shred Calling. Horned Nightmare is obviously, we know what it is. Horned Nightmare is the double Hand of Gul'dan one. Grim Inquisitor Dread Calling. Each soul shard you spend the Hand of Gul'dan increases the damage of your next called Dreadstalkers by 3%. So I don't know if the Sims are accounting the forces of the Horned Nightmare legendary effect proccing as 3 more shards spent on Grim Inquisitor Dread Calling. I also don't know if it actually works that way in game. I don't think anybody does, because we haven't been able to test with 2 legendaries. So if it does work like that, which I don't really think it does or will, it doesn't really make much sense, because you're not actually like consuming shards to cast it. You're casting it for free, which it says right here. If it does work that way though, this adds so much value to Grim Inquisitor, a good bit of value to Grim Inquisitor Shred Calling, because you're essentially adding with 1 proc 12% more damage. I guess 9. It depends how many procs you get. You can add 9, 18 percent onto your next Dreadstalkers cast, and depending on the build you play, that can also get out of control pretty quickly. But as far as this being messed up in Sims, it very well might be. I don't know the current state of Demonology APLs, and regardless, the single target damage is a bit lower here than Destro and AF actually is. Number 3, Wilfred's Horned Nightmare here. This is also going to be a relatively consistent build. Horned Nightmare also giving you a chance to spawn more imps, so a chance for more demonic core procs, so more demon bolt cast, shorter tyrant cast. There's a lot of synergy with basically every single build you have of demo legendary wise. Unfortunately, Bale Spider's Burning Core not really performing where we probably wanted it to be, but I just don't think there's a whole lot of synergy here, being real. I mean, honestly, like, pun, not really, pun half intended. Synergy Bale Spiders, worse than Horned Bale Spiders. So, yeah. But getting into the next sim here, this is 1 boss target, 3 minutes. Once again, so very similar to this, 5 minutes versus 3 minutes. You still see Horned Synergy, and Wilfred's being here. If we trim this to like 2.5 minutes, it would probably favor Wilfred's a little bit more. But you can see it does sort of close the gap a little bit here, but pretty consistent across the board. Actually looking at both here, tabbing back and forth, not much really changes. I'm very curious about Horned Nightmare and Grim Inquisitors as well. Moving on to the AoE sims though. So one thing I want to point out here in single target stuff, whether it's 5 minutes or 3 minutes, Implosion is not very good here. We did sim it. It's just down here. Implosion, and I don't know, how many do we have here? There's, let me see, where are all my implosions at? We have 1, 2, 3, Horned Implosion, Synergy Implosion, Wilfred's Implosion. We have a decent bit. Looking ahead to the big ones here, we didn't sim like Implosion, Bale Spiders, Implosion, Grim Inquisitors, because it's not worth it. Looking ahead to the AoE sims though, I was expecting Implosion to gain some value, and Implosion gained a decent bit of value. Horned Nightmare and Implosion, this is the build we talked about if double legendary doesn't need to go live. Horned Nightmare, number 1, a good legendary in Mythic Plus, a good legendary in rating, a good legendary everywhere. Number 2, it has a chance of spawning more imps, typically 3 imps if it procs. 3 imps imploding at AoE means 15% more haste when it procs, if it procs 1 time before you implode. If it procs both times, you're gonna get 30% more haste off 2 procs playing it with the Implosion legendary, and that's not taking into consideration procs with your Tyrant extension. Horned Nightmare with Implosion can actually get really insane. That's the crazy part. And yes, I'm looking back to the single target ones here. Horned Implosion is not like, yeah, okay, it's a bit of a loss here, but you're still playing Horned. You're still playing your best legendary universally for the most part here, right, in these sims. So you're not losing as much as just playing, all right, we're just playing either Horned Nightmare or Implosion, only having access to 1. You're playing 2, so you can bring a good one that's like solid universally in, and also play Implosion, which is really good in certain settings. Look at the drop off here. This is not like a different, this is still playing Implosion, but it's synergy Implosion. Horn Nightmare with Implosion, this combination gives so much extra value for all the imps you get. More Implosion damage, more haste, which means more Implosions being cast faster and faster. It just stacks upon itself. You have Wilfred's Implosion right here, Horn synergy here just because, hey, they're both good. They're both realistically good at this point, you know. But you have Wilfred's Implosion, synergy Implosion, Horn Implosion being just super solid. And moving on, this is a 5-minute 3-boss target. If we go to 3 minutes 3-boss target, well, you still have essentially the same thing. It's ahead by about 400 DPS, give or take. Wilfred staying in the same place once again. If we made it a 2.5-minute sim, it probably gained a bit of value. But the big thing here for Demo, Horn Nightmare and Implosion Legendary look honestly pretty good. This is 3 targets, 5 minutes. Where are the actual Destro ones? Let's see here. This is 3 targets, 5 minutes for Destro, 10,038 DPS. Similar about the 10k mark, give or take a little bit. And once again, I want to drive home these APLs very well might not be optimized. They might not even be working properly 100%. When you mix in 2 different legendaries and different effects, certain priorities will take over that shouldn't be there, vice versa, everything else. But I just think it's really cool actually being able to look at the synergy between them and then go from there. I'm impressed with Horn Nightmare Implosion, and I mean, if double legendaries are a thing, there are so many builds I want to play with. Synergy Cinders, Synergy Madness, but really Cinders Madness sounds like so much fun as destruction. This is gonna feel like I feel like this is gonna be like BFA Destro in the end. 3 conflags, Madness, launch all the bolts, go for it, dude. Why not? Synergy Agony is gonna feel insane. Horn Nightmare Implosion, dude, that's gonna be so cool. That's gonna be so incredibly cool. This is going to open up so many interesting combinations for Warlock and really every class out there in general. If it becomes a thing, then you'd ever expect. It's gonna be so awesome if it's actually a thing. Thanks for watching, guys. Now, I had a lot of fun making this video, and it's been a video that I've wanted to make for a while now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it just as much as I did. Once again, I don't know if there's going to be double legendary options in 9.1 or 9.0.5 or whatever patch we get next. But I think at this point, with 9.0 winding down and me myself being in this patch for just about a year now since the first wave of alpha, I would like to see a little more, and double legendaries are a lot of fun. Let me know what you guys think of these legendary combinations in the comment section below. And if you have any, I guess, interesting ideas or unique interactions that I missed or didn't talk about, feel free to point them out there. Any WeakAuras profiles or add-ons you see here, you can indeed get for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions, feel free to do so. Once again, I don't really know what's going to be happening at Blizzcon in a couple weeks here, but I assume we'll be hearing a lot more about the next patch in Warcraft. But if there's really any topics you guys want to hear more about between now and then, I do have a few videos planned to release before then for sure, as well as hopefully our Mythic Sire Denathrius kill tomorrow night, I guess tonight, maybe next week, I don't know, wherever, depending you are in the world, and wherever we kill it, whenever we kill it. But if you guys have anything you want to hear about or talk about, feel free to also leave that in the comment section below. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to see more WoW content, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Helps out a lot. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.